You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you SPKEX volatility products. SPKEX options and futures are traded on the SPKEX Volatility Index, SPKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about SPKEX at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back here on the network. One final time here for all you on-demand folks, giving you a taste of all things volatility. Yes, it is time once again for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. Except no substitutes. We are the only ones. And of course, from the old network upon which so many of you are just binging these days. Remember, if you like what you hear, Vol Views, anything else we do on the network, do keep rating and reviewing. Let us help the new folks continue to discover the content. You can leave it on the Vol Views show proper. You can leave it on the network feed. You could leave it where you get our app in all the major app stores. No shortage of places for you folks to leave your love. If you want one of the growing number of tubers out there, you could leave some love there. Whatever floats your boat. It all helps new folks continue to discover the content. And of course, once you've had a taste of Vol Views and you want to go deeper, down the rabbit hole, you know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. You could get in on the double pro action that we got going on this week. We already had the Oracle from New Hampshire, Mr. Matt Amberson, fielding all your questions out there on Wednesday because we love you folks. We had Mr. Meatball's buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini, formerly of Genesis Volatility, now of Amber Data, answering all of your questions about crypto. And they are legion right now. Everyone's got them. What's going on with the vol, the skew, the shakeups in that space, and a whole bunch more. That was another great session we had coming at you. You guys can check that out over there, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. And of course, you can also stay tuned for Options Oddities immediately after this show. All sorts of fun lurking out there, as well as giveaways, live streams, all sorts of fun. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to join us on the dark side. Trust me, it's a fun place to be. And also joining us from the dark side of Austin, also known as the Southern Volatility Mecca, we have the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, how go things in the Southern Volatility Mecca this week, sir? We missed you at the big FIA show in town this week.
Yeah, no, I missed it too. Yeah, it's not bad. It's a interesting trading day. I'm kind of excited to talk about it. It's been a really weird week, and we're just going to get more of it as the day progresses and as we head into the Thanksgiving week next week, which should be a fun one. So lots for how slow it is. I think there's plenty to discuss.
I think a weird week is a good way to describe it. So let's get to it. It is time for the volatility review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we break down everything that's rocking and rolling out there on the vol side. We're going to talk, of course, the latest trades, the updates, the volume, the volatility, size positions, the trends, all sorts of fun out there. And kicking off the show today, it's kind of it's a weird week and a kind of a weird end to the week. We are heading into a holiday week next week, listeners, so that probably accounts for a little bit of the malaise we're seeing out there today. The Dow up about 0.25%. The S&P right now actually hanging out up after having been down earlier today, but not up by much, about 0.05, 0.06%. So you're not talking a heck of a lot. Still hanging around that 39.5 level that it seems to have a hard time shaking free of lately. And the NASDAQ off about not even 0.5%, about 0.4% out there. So markets kind of shrugging their shoulders going into the weekend here, but we all know that could change on a dime. So keep your powder dry and stay frosty out there, listeners. That means our old friend Spikes literally unched on the week. It was 24.25 last week, and when we kicked off the show today, 24.25, listeners. So no living to be done out there in Spikes land this week. VIX, a little bit of a different story. Closing that gap a bit, 23.60 when we kicked off the show. That puts it up almost a full point, about 0.95 points here on the week. Our old friend VVIX, just when it seemed like it was getting frothy again, just like when it seemed like it might be trending, let's say, into the 90s perhaps. Nope. Giving up the ghost again this week, a day like today. Certainly helping to make that happen. Back down to 78, down the whopping 8 points from where we were this time last week. Our other vol friend, the Viking, a.k.a. VSPKES, not coming in quite as aggressively. The VSPKES was at about a 96. 96 still. So that's down about a point. So not as much evolution out there on the VSPKES. Of course, probably the reason for that is that VSPKES is hanging out pretty close to its all-time low. We're about 6.5 points away. It was right around 89.5. Was the all-time low for the VSPKES that was back in July of this year. So as we get closer to that, probably going to see a little bit of that movement slow down, but we shall see. It is a holiday week, so we could certainly test some lows in vol next week. Mr. Meatball, sir, like you mentioned, kind of a weird week. What was catching your eye and lighting up your tape this week, sir?
Well, I think that the big thing we've got to talk about is I think Tuesday's rally and then subsequent absolute melt and then kind of pop back when Poland got hit by that missile. And why I think it's such a good thing to talk about, not someone getting hit by it, not the missile actually hitting or people dying. Obviously, that's terrible. But as a case study of what can actually make the VIX move and why it's not moving now. Everyone says, okay, we've got all this bad stuff happening. They're right. But we know about all that bad stuff, and that is why vol continues to just kind of sit here, because we're aware that there's inflation and oil is going up and there's war in Ukraine, things like that. What happened on Tuesday, though, was we saw the VIX move up 3 points in about 3 minutes. And that is what happens when an unknown happens. And when if things had continued to progress on Tuesday and things had actually kind of snowballed, then that's how we can get the VIX to 40. But with things calming down there, that brings us right back to where we are and why VIX continues to behave the way it's behaving.
Let's see what's going on out there in the vol land. Let's start in the land of VIX futures. By the way, Spikes futures also pretty active. I had a good chance to catch up with all of the MIAX folks. They were all in Chicago. Everyone was in Chicago this week for the big FIA show that was in town. As I mentioned earlier in the week, listeners, it was a bit of an interesting visual coming into the show on Monday where everyone was scrambling to wipe away. Mark, take a guess on Monday. Take a guess who was the marquee, the platinum sponsor of the FIA show at the start of the week.
Not FTS.
Yes, they were. They were the big dog, stage sponsor, you name it. And as I walked in the door, they were hurriedly erasing that name, that logo from anything they possibly could. So it was a bit of a backpedal. Again, kind of showing how far those tendrils reached, how much money they were spending all over the place to make themselves at least appear credible on the surface. And it seemed to work for a while. So yes, that took a lot of people by surprise at the beginning of this week. All that a long way around to saying it was an interesting week, but I did have a chance to catch up with the MIAX folks. A lot saw Shelley this week, saw a bunch of them. Didn't fly in Simon. He got to stay home, skipped a 30-hour flight this year, but still saw a bunch of guys, saw Tom, saw Matt, both of whom are supposed to be on the show. I think they're a little under the weather today from all the traveling out there, but we'll get them back on the show soon. So a lot going on in the land of futures and the options. They're working on some interesting vol content over there in MIAX land. We should be able to share with you guys soon. So it should be fun. In the meantime, let's get out to the land of the volatility surface. And coming into showtime, as you might expect, things are pretty much down. November, obviously, rolling off the board. I had someone reach out to me recently, and they're like, what's going on? My VIX, where's my position? Why is the market so crazy on Wednesday? I had to explain to them, well, VIX, Wednesday is an important day for VIX options. They're like, oh, yeah. So, yes, make sure you understand. Most brokers these days do a good job of surfacing that information. If you're trading VIX options, wait a minute, these are kind of a little bit non-standard, so make sure you understand that. But every once in a while, someone slips through the cracks, and they freak out when their VIX positions are gone in the middle of the week. So Nove off the board this week, listeners. December, yes, that's where we are now in the life cycle. How long have we been looking at the end of the year as some sort of distant looming spot on the horizon? Well, it is here now, listeners. The December contract is the front contract. It is down nearly a full point, about 0.8 of a point on the week. The Jan future now, we're already into next year. The Jan future slots into the number 2 spot there. I don't know if I'm ready to talk Jan futures, but alas, that's where we are, listeners. The Jan future down almost half a point, about 0.4 of a point out there this week. Mr. Meatball, any thoughts here as Nove rolls off the board? Anything catching your eye with all the settlement fund? And then your thoughts on what's going on with the front portion and indeed the entirety of the volatility surface this week, sir?
Well, a lot of people are asking me, why is VIX sitting on top of, why are the VIX futures basically sitting on top of VIX? The spread between December, which is about 2480, and the cash index, which is about 2350 right now, is only about 1.3. And that is pretty tight for having an entire month. And the answer is that the futures are already pricing in the holiday week next week, and the cash index has not begun to price that in yet. So I'm expecting to see the cash index fall somewhat dramatically Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and the VIX futures to be relatively stable. The other thing that I think you have to comment is how depressed the spread is between Jan and Dece. There is a full 2-point spread between December and January, and that is incredibly wide for the VIX when you consider that Jan Feb is 50 cents. By that metric, Jan is about 50 cents too expensive relative to Dece, or Dece is 50 cents too cheap relative to January. That front end of the curve is incredibly steep for where we are in the cycle.
Yeah, 2 points between Jan and Dece I was looking at earlier today as well. That is quite the chasm out there, listeners. Intriguing stuff to be found. Let's keep on rolling here into the land of the vol options, listeners. Spikes hanging out, similar paper, similar positions to what we saw this time last week. Let's just do a top 5 out here. We've got number 5, we got the D's 24s. Number 4, we got the D's 26s. So those are fairly normal positions, all things considered. Then we get to the fun. Number 3, we got the D's 50s, 5-0s. And then number 2, we've got the Jan 19 calls, so going back the other way. And then the top spot, yet again, in Spikes options, the D's 10s. Once again, meaty in the money contract. Obviously, I believe they were the Nove 160s that were open last week. Those puts have now rolled off the board. No one diving back in to replace the deep in the money puts yet. But then again, we shall see as things progress next week. Let's get out to VIX options. And we mentioned at the top of the show, kind of a bit of a weird week. And I think you'll see why once I start breaking down some of the volume numbers for you this week, listeners. It was weird. The VIX was on or it was off this week. It was putting up numbers or it was doing a heck of a lot of nothing. Today, the latter, a heck of a lot of nothing going up right now. 141,000 contracts only on the tape right now. That's kind of reminiscent of late July, early to mid-August kind of numbers there, or maybe late December. Come back at me in about a month or 5 weeks or so, and then I'll expect those kind of numbers. Not right now, but kind of a quiet week. Maybe everyone's already heading out for getting an early start on the holiday here, getting out of Dodge. Either way, not a lot of paper hitting the tape today. But again, that could change in a second. The missile falls in the wrong place, like we saw earlier this week, and all hell can break loose. The ADV back below 600,000, listeners. It had drifted north of it, got up somewhere around 612 earlier this week, back below it again this week, back down to 595,000 contracts out there. Even though net on the week, it is up about 2,000. So we're at 593 on the show last week. In between, on shows like the Option Block and others, it did get higher, back north of 600K, but alas, back down again this week. Let's break down the top 10 positions such as they are out there now, listeners. Obviously, Nove rolling off the board, taking a lot of OI with it. There's only about 8.2 million contracts open in VIX options right now. That's not a ton. So obviously waiting to replace some of that OI, but still some intriguing nuggets to be found here. By the way, even with Nove rolling off the board, we still are 10-0 calls over puts in the top 10 out here, listeners. So read into that what you will. I always find that a fascinating nugget just to see what's going on in those top 10 size positions. And for the last few weeks, it's been all calls all the time out there. Number 10, 140,000 contracts. That's what it costs you to break into the top 10 in VIX land right now. That gets you to the Feb 60s. Right behind it, number 9, $147 of the Feb 70s. So some vertical action hanging out there in Feb. Number 8, $148 of the D60s. You know, we're in weird times, listeners, when the D60s seem sane and reasonable. Number 7, $149 of the March 80s. Here we go. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Number 6, $153 of the D70s. So starting to get up there. Number 5, $169 of the Feb 80s. Getting some love for the Feb strike. Number 4, this is interesting. 176,000 of the December 35 calls. Wow. How normal. To be exceeded by number 3, 196,000 of the D's 30. So also, dare I say it, a fairly normal trade. Now, in most environments, someone's coming in trading the 30s. It might seem out of place, but where we are right now, that's fairly normal. Number 2, we're getting back at it, listeners, 204,000 of the March 75s. And the number 1 position out there in VIX options right now, 268,000 of the Jan 70. So once again, it's pretty much all far out of the money upside all the time, with the exception of the D's 30s and 35s. And if maybe you want to throw the 60s in there, depends what your definition of far out of the money optimistic paper is. I'm not seeing a lot of that on the tape today, though, listeners. Like I said, VIX was kind of binary this week. It was on or it was off. And today it looks like it is off. Only 141,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog, such as it is, 10,000 of the Feb 65s, followed by 10,000 as well of the D65. So maybe a little bit of roll action going on there. They line up pretty nicely there. Number 3, 9,400 of the Feb 90s. There we go. Now we're getting back in it, listeners. Number 4, 7,600 of the D's 42 halves. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty anemic day today, listeners, 7,200 of the D's 33 calls. Getting out to yesterday, another day where VIX was kind of off. Only 356,000 contracts on the tape yesterday, listener. Let's start at the bottom this time just for fun. Number 5, we got 14,000 of the D's 30s. Number 4, we got 20,000 pretty much exactly of the D's 37s. Number 3, about 22,000 of the Feb 29s. When was the last time we saw someone trade for size, an option with a 20 handle in Feb? It's all been 60, 70, 80 nonsense. So there we go. 22,000 of the Feb 29s. Number 2, 36,000 of the D's 27s. And number 1, on a fairly light day yesterday, 40,004 of the June 70s. So not to be outdone. We have seen a lot of paper in June opening to the downside. We've joked a lot about the June 15 puts and trying to penny that customer out there. Getting some June upside action just to keep things balanced out there. Wednesday, I suppose you could say, was the one kind of middle of the road day of this week. 520,000 contracts on the tape. So a decent amount of paper. Nothing to write home about, but nothing super light either. The big dog on Wednesday, 40,000 of the Jan 70s, followed by 40,000 as well of the April 65s. So bit of a time spread / vertical. Are they already rolling the Jan, listeners? They have come in to roll some of this stuff earlier, but that would be a little early to roll the Jan. But hey, we've seen crazier things. Number 3, 29,000 of the D's 40s. Number 4, 24,000 of the D's 50 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on a kind of shrug your shoulders kind of day on Wednesday, listeners, 21,000 of the D's 25 calls. And now we get to it, listeners. Tuesday and Monday. These days are kind of weird for a lot of reasons. Like I mentioned, this is a weird week. I had to go check the numbers twice on a couple different platforms to make sure that they weren't broken, because they showed me VIX did exactly the same amount of paper on Tuesday and on Monday. Very rare that we see that, let alone to that such a degree of precision. But we also saw, these are the days, listeners, where we saw that M creeping back in there, the million. He's finally hitting a million again. We thought last week we might have some days when we might hit a million. Certainly the big crazy whipsaw or the crazy rally days we've seen in the last couple of weeks, you might expect VIX to hit a million. We didn't. This week, a little bit of a dust up over there in Eastern Europe. That can get us close to a million, or even over a million in this case, because Tuesday, 1.02 million contracts on the tape. Why do I say it with that degree of precision? You'll see in a second. But the big dog on Tuesday, 46,000 of the D's 50s, followed by 44,000 of the D's 30s. So it looks like maybe some vertical action, the 30-50 going up there. Number 3, 43,000 of the Nove 24 puts. Obviously, Nove going the way of the dodo on Wednesday, so that also helps drive paper on Tuesday. 34,000 for number 4 of the Nove 26 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on Tuesday, 32,000 of the Nove 25 calls. Monday, also 1.02 million contracts. I don't think I've ever seen that before, where VIX is pretty much exactly tied. But that appears to be the case, listeners. The big dogs on Monday, though, were a lot larger. We had 106,000 of the Feb 70s, followed by 105,000 of the Feb 60s. We were just talking about what looked like some vertical action out there in Feb. That does appear to be the case on Monday, listeners. For size, number 3, 30,000 of the Nove 23 puts. Number 4, 27,000 of the Nove 24 puts. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty active day, 25,000 of the Nove 25 calls. So there you go, listeners. 1.02 million contracts each on Monday and Tuesday. Then kind of a shrug on the shoulder day on Wednesday, and then the rest of the week, Thursday and Friday, a whole heck of a lot of nothing. So an intriguing start to the week, and then kind of a bit of a whimper to close the week out. Mr. Meatball, you described this week as weird. I certainly concur with you. What caught your eye in this early tsunami and then late trickle of paper in VIX options this week, sir?
Yeah, there was some big, we saw our ratio call buyers back again this week. They're playing in March, buying upside on a 5-to-1 ratio against the 30s. They continue to put this hedge on. They continue to move it around, but that is really the driver of paper so far, and about all that we've really seen this week that totally caught my eye in VIX. They were doing some June. Interesting spread that went up on this yesterday. They bought the D's 27-37 call spread. Today, nothing. We got some call sales going up today. We did see some, again, as I said, that they were doing some April ratios as well. They did the April 32.5 65. We saw some Jan 70s go up. Nothing just gigantic. Tuesday, we saw a 50-70 call spread go up and a really just really that Fed call spread from the beginning of the week and a lot of smaller paper around it.
Yeah, what do you think of far out of the money verticals like that? Like 60-70 going up 100,000 times. I think your compatriot, the Rock Lobster, might call that a kissing your sister trade, but maybe you like it more. I don't know.
I think it's probably against like a credit portfolio or something, and they're just locking up. It's a hedge against some sort of outlier risk that they're making sure they don't run into. It makes sense to me. Inexpensive, just able to protect yourself against some sort of outlier.
Inexpensive is the word. It's only 18 cents. Looks like they did it for, so not laying out a ton out there. You like that, listeners? Feb 60-70. Someone liked it to the tune of 100,000 contracts this week. So interest clearly lying there. Let's see. Yeah, there's about 140,000 open on both of those strikes now. So maybe they have come in and done some more since Monday. But clearly someone looks at that as a decent upside protection. 10 handles for 18 cents. Intriguing. We all know you don't have to get up there to make that thing start to look a little bit better. But again, the question then is if we start popping to the upside, how much pop are you going to get with that when you have you're short the 70s, long the 60s? You get something, but intriguing. We had a long talk with Mr. Matt from Orats on the Pro Q&A this week, listeners, about the use case for quote unquote garbage VIX calls and garbage SPY and SPX puts, and when they work, when they don't, how you can use them in your own portfolios. This is the kind of an area he's really been diving into at my behest because of paper like this going up and a lot of that actually farther out of the money paper usually out there. So it's been an intriguing area for us to kind of sink our teeth into. If you're intrigued by that, listeners, check out that Pro Q&A we did this week over at theoptionsinsider.com/pro as we head on into the land of the vol ETPs. And again, not a heck of a lot going on out there to end the week either. Let's start with good old SPKX because it doesn't have a better name, at least yet. 25.40 when we kicked off the show, down about half a point. This is, of course, I hate to call it vanilla, but the non-levered spikes ETP out there. It has dropped a little bit more. It's down to about 25 and a quarter now, listeners. So that puts it down about 0.65 or so on the week. I'm not seeing a ton of paper out there in the plain vanilla version yet. It does seem like folks like themselves a little bit of the levered action. Let's just see if anything's going up out there. Yeah, not a heck of a lot of paper going up out there in good old SPKX today or this week. The top positions out there, such as they are, we've got the NOV 30s for the top spot, and then the NOV 31s. Obviously, those are going the way of the dodo today, followed by the DEES 47s for number 3, the NOV 47s for number 4, and then the NOV 40s for number 5. So most of that top 5 going the way of the dodo, listeners. We'll see if that shall be replaced after today. Let's go out to Spiky, though. This is a levered friend out there. This is the one that does seem to be attracting a wee bit more interest, both on the underlying and on the options front. For obvious reasons, folks like themselves a little bit of leverage out there. And it's moving a bit again today. It was at about a 25 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down about half a point. Actually, no, 0.7 of a point. As we're coming into the start of this segment now, listeners, it has dropped some more. It's down to about a 24.60. So that puts it down over a point, about 1.1 points on the week. So again, that leverage kicking in, listeners, getting you a little bit more downside action. As a result, it's a little bit more popular with the options traders out there today. Looks like we've got a ratio put spread going up. The DEES 2023 put spread going up 10 by 20 times. Doesn't sound like a lot, but for these new products, that's kind of a lot. Looks like paper buying the 23 puts, selling the 20 puts 1 by 2 listeners out there. So that's intriguing. And in terms of the top positions out there, actually got some paper open out here in good old Spiky. Number 1, we've got the DEES 54s, followed by number 2, the NOV 56s, number 3, the DEES 27s, number 4, the NOV 54s, and rounding out the top 5 in Spiky this week, 45 of the NOV 40s out there. So obviously a lot of NOV going the way of the dodo. Mr. Meatball, I know you slung a one lot in good old SPKX. Maybe you was Spiky, I don't remember, back in October. Have you or your crazies in your pitch chat have a chance to revisit these lately, sir, and keep an eye on them? What are your thoughts on the latest activity we're seeing out there in SPKX and Spiky, sir?
Yeah, not a lot of ton of order flow in these ones. SPKX is down about 4 cents. SPKY down about 8 cents, as it should be. Just not quite a ton of trading there yet. We did have a buyer today of a 10 lot of the DC 2320 puts 1x2. They bought 10 of the 23 puts to sell 20 of the 20 puts. They paid, it appears, 92 cents for that spread. So they're looking for spiky to continue to drop.
Yes, the 1x2 out there, 10x20 size going up out there these days. Well, at least the trickles, the early glimmers of it, listeners out there. You know what had glimmers of promise and then has turned out to kind of be, I won't call it a dud, but it's not exactly lighting the world on fire, is SVIX. Remember, listeners, all the hand-wringing, all the noise, the Sturm und Drang. How could we possibly allow an inverse volatility product to come back? Think of the children. And so far, no one's really thinking about it at all. It was at a 12.75 when we kicked off the show. Obviously, this is the inverse product, listeners. Up about a quarter. Has ticked up a little bit since then. It looks like it's hanging out at about a 12.90 or so right now. So that puts it up about 0.4 or so on the day. But again, not a heck of a lot of movement out there. Also not a heck of a lot of paper. Only a whopping 326 contracts on the tape. The ADV continues to struggle. 12.35. That's down another 100 from this time last week. So again, not a heck of a lot going on out here in SVIX. That ADV at least has managed to exceed 1,000, but it doesn't seem like it's going to hit it today. We do have a weird frame of reference with this show because we always check in on Fridays, which is, of course, the weekly expiration day. And that does seem to be the one day of the week that tends to gin up some paper in these names. But apparently today is not going to be the case out there. Let's go out to see what the top positions are, such as they are in SVIX. And there is some size out here. The top position, 2141 of the Jan 14 calls. Remember I said we're hanging out a little bit shy of 13 listeners, 1290 right now. Number 2, about 1700 of the Nove 11 puts. Number 3, also about 1700 of the Nove 12 calls. So eerily similar papers, maybe a bit of a risk reversal or collar out there. Number 4, we got the Nove 12 puts, 1500 of those, and rounding out the top 5 in SVIX right now, 1,300 of the DC 12 calls. So again, Nove rolling off the board today. Going to take a lot of this OI with it. Be interesting to see how SVIX shapes up afterward. UVIX, of course, our levered friend that does seem to be stealing all the oxygen in the room. It was at about 8.5 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down about 0.3 of a point. As we're coming into start of this segment, it's at about 8.25, so it has dropped about another quarter of a point, puts it down a little over half, about 0.55 points on the week. And this one usually tends to put on a decent showing whenever we have the show running, listeners. Folks like to trade this one on the weekly expiration. That is the case again today. 8,313 contracts on the tape right now. The ADV is 6,738. This is what I mean by it outperforms on show days, because the ADV continues to kind of go down. But every time we talk about it on the show, it's exceeding that ADV. So I'm getting the sense that the one day that it does that is Fridays. The days we tend to talk about it also tends to line up with weekly expiration, which is when folks tend to like to trade these vol ETPs. What is lighting it up out there today, listeners, in this over 8,000 contracts? It's like 1,634 of the Nove 8.5 calls going up today. Again, that was where we were hanging out not too long ago. That was the at-the-money strike, so maybe not surprising there. That's the big dog. Followed by about 600 of the June 19 calls. That's interesting. At number 3, 300 of the Nove 11 halves. Number 4, 250 of the DC 9 calls. Those are expiring on the 9th, so in the weeklies. And also 250 almost of the Nove 8.5 calls. So interesting. Actually, the Nove, the 1,600 that are going up today of the 8.5s expire on the 25th. So they expire next week. So intriguing stuff out there. In terms of the top positions in UVIX, there's almost 4,000 of the 9 calls open for the number 1 spot, followed by number 2, 2,000 of the DC 18 puts. Number 3, about 1,300 of the DC 11 puts. Number 4, about 1,200 of the DC 30 calls. And rounding out the top 5 size positions, such as they are in UVIX right now, 1,000 of the Jan 15 puts. Mark, you were an advocate, a supporter of UVIX early on versus SVIX. You thought that was going to attract more paper. That certainly seems to be the case right now. Have you had a chance to sink your teeth into UVIX? Anything catching your eye out there this week, sir?
Yeah, I have. It looked like until we got that Polish attack, it looked like this thing was going to head to a new all-time low. Kind of got stopped in its tracks. It's trading right near its all-time low. Its all-time low is, oh no, you know what? It's at an all-time low right now. I think it could be sub 8 here by the end of next week. And there's going to be some opportunity to make some money being long some puts here if the market continues to behave the way it's behaving.
Let's see how UVXY is behaving. Looking in the rearview mirror at this UVIX kid starting to perhaps steal a march on it. UVXY was at about a 9 when we kicked off the show. That puts it down about a quarter of a point. As we're starting into this segment, it's down to about an 880. That puts it down about 0.45, almost half a point on the week. So a little bit more erosion kicking in there in UVXY. Seeing some decent paper on the tape today, 188,000. Even if the ADV remains kind of anemic, 243,000 is only up about 1,000 right now. So UVXY has a little bit of ways to go to kind of rebuild the action, the love, the interest that it had from earlier. There was a while there when VXX was, of course, outpacing VIX options, and UVXY was doing a fairly decent clip as well. I mean, obviously 243 is nothing to sneeze at, but we've seen it be more active out there in the past. Let's look at the top 5 positions out here in UVXY right now. Number 5, we got 21,000 of the no 15 calls. Number 4, 22,000 of the Jan 75s. I was talking to someone about UVXY OI this week at the conference, and I was mentioning some of this far out of the money call paper, and they seemed surprised by that. They didn't know that. I told them, keep an eye on this far out of the money stuff. There is some intriguing stuff. Usually it's some size overriding. Every now and then get people buying them too, but usually there's a lot of size overriding. And you can see why they get more premium than you might think for some of these things. But every now and then these far out of the money strikes do pop in. Today it is number 4, 22,000 of the Jan 75s. Number 3, 25,000 of the Nov 9 puts. Number 4, 29,000 of the Nov 9 calls, which again, that's a strike we're hanging out at, so no surprise there. And number 1, a huge leap here, 75,000 of the Nov 10 calls. So someone's on that strike for size. Let's hope for their sake they aggressively overwrote those and they're going to start taking them off now. If they were hoping for a little bit of... actually, no, these are expiring next week, so they have another week on their hands. So they're probably happy for that because given this near-term paper is usually paper buying, so we'll see. They want a little bit of a upside action here. They got a week to do it. UVXY has been known to break some hearts in the past, listeners. In terms of what's trading today, it's a fairly active day, like we said. The big dog on the tape today, again, you're going to see a lot of expiration paper coming in. That's kind of what we're seeing. 26,000 of the Nov 9 calls going up. Again, that was the at-the-money strike a few minutes ago. Number 8, 16,000 of the Nov 9 puts going up. So there you go. Number 3, 16,000 of the Nov 9 calls expiring next week. So a lot of love for the 9 strike right now. Number 4, 12,000 of the D's 8.5 puts expiring on the 2nd. And rounding out the top 5 most actives out there in UVXY today, about 6,000 of the Nov 10 puts. Interesting. Mr. Meatball, I know UVXY was a favorite of yours. Maybe UVIX is starting to steal some of that thunder now, but what are your thoughts on our friend, the usually ever eroding UVXY this week, sir?
Yeah, it's right near its all-time low and holding there. It is back below 8, but for people looking for the reverse split, that usually happens around 6. So, because they want to make sure it doesn't get back over 10. So I'm expecting it to, sorry. I do think that we could see it kind of hang around here. It will slowly, I think, drop a little bit next week, but nothing, if we're going to sit here and watch paint dry for the next week, UVXY will be potentially in the 7s.
I'm getting a distinct paint drying vibe right now. Are you as well?
I am. Very much so.
Of course, these markets, you never know. Anything could turn on a dime. But right now, it feels kind of paint dry-y right now to me, listeners. Does it feel that way to you? Maybe I'm just biased by what we're seeing going into the weekend. Either way, let's keep it rolling here through the ever-expanding vol ETP landscape, listeners. VXX, yes, is back. We have to pay attention to it again. Blame the meatball. Blame the folks at Barclays. 16.5 right now, down about half a point. Seeing actually some paper sneak in there today, which again, it's expiration. You would probably hope for that. But the ADV right now is 59,000 contracts, up about 1,000 from last week. And right now on the tape, we are seeing exactly 59,000 contracts on the tape right now. So actually a somewhat active day, which is interesting. VXX has been a while since they've been able to dig themselves out of the hole that they dug for themselves. So let's see if this trend can continue. Let's look at the top positions out here in VXX. Let's just do a top 5 out here. Number 5, we've got the Nove 17 puts, 13,000 of those. Number 4, 15,000 of the Jan 3 puts. These are the pre-split adjusted ones. So those are the last of a dying breed there. Number 3, we've got 19,000 of the Jan 17 puts. Number 2, 21,000 of the November 23 calls. And rounding out the top 5 size positions in VXX right now, that is 33,000 of the Nove 20 calls. If you're wondering what is going up today on a fairly active day, let's find out. Number 1 today, we got the D16 puts expiring on the 30th. So in the weeklies, there's 7,500 of those, followed by 5,200 of the Nove 16 half puts. Number 3, 5,000 of the D17 puts. Number 4, 5,000 as well of the D16 puts. So it looks like a bit of a vertical there. And number 5, 5,000 of the March 20 puts. So that's kind of surprising. I expected it to be pretty much all Nove all the time as folks are kind of scrambling to take stuff off or put it on right as we go into expiration today. But only one of the top 5 is in November. The rest decent March. So bit surprising. Maybe some folks are starting to take another look at VXX and start to put on, obviously, some longer-term positions out here. Mark, it seemed like we could wash our hands of VXX, and then the folks at Barclays said, nope, you got to start paying attention to it again. Have you been watching, or dare I say it, playing in VXX at all in the last few weeks, sir?
Well, I mean, it's the most liquid and best kind of constant run of where that 30-day blended future is moving. So I do watch it. I mostly trade in UVIX and UVXY, but I do obviously watch it trade and keep an eye on it, and because it's the best measure, most liquid measure for where, like I said, where that blended future is moving.
When folks come into the land of the pit and they ask you for some products to recommend, do you recommend VXX again? Is that still on your radar? Or are you going to play watch and see a little longer?
I tell them to watch it. I don't tell them to trade it. I think that's really, there are better vehicles for trading vol, but there's no better vehicle for monitoring, I think, where the futures are moving for someone that doesn't really pay attention to futures, right? I watch the VIX futures, but if you want to have an ETF up on your screen to know what VIX futures are doing, VXX is the best vehicle.
It does serve that function. It is kind of your proxy for what's going on out there. And the term structure, if you don't have time or the inclination to pay attention yourself. Let's see what's going on. Let's pay attention to a little bit of earnings vol, listeners, because we are still in it. And this is quite the season. I'm hard pressed to think of another season since we've been crunching these numbers, which predates the pandemic. So going back a little bit now, I have yet to see a cycle like this one. So intriguing stuff. Some big names popping off this week. Tuesday, we had Walmart, Home Depot, good old KK, a.k.a. Krispy Kreme. Wednesday, we got Target, Lowe's, NVIDIA, and Cisco. Thursday, we had Alibaba, Macy's, Kohl's, BJ's, and Stone Cold. And today, if you're wondering what's going on with sneaker vol, I present to you Foot Locker, listeners. Luckily for you, because we like you folks, we have the earnings move results, earnings season, and yes, even the earnings trades reports hotly updated off the presses from our friends over there at ORATS. Just because we like you, all for free over there, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the options news and articles tab to begin that journey to the dark side. Let's just pop off a couple of these here, see how they're doing now. Baba going into their announcement was 78.16. They were popping off yesterday before the bell, listeners. They were pricing in about 7.9%, and they ended up delivering about close to that, 6.9%. These are, again, that's the move results report, so that measures kind of the immediate post-earnings impact. Obviously, if you wait a little longer, have a different time horizon, it's going to be a little bit different. If you look at Baba right now, it's trading at about $80.50, so it actually has come in quite a bit. So if you were doing a little of the old premium harvesting out there, you're actually looking a lot better today even. But again, that's what the difference a day makes. Again, there's a lot of retail on the docket this week, listeners. The Macy's was a big one. They were also yesterday before the bell. About $20 is where they were trading. They were pricing 11.3%, and they were pretty much 11.9% is what they delivered. They were coming out of their announcement at 22.06, so they moved a little over $2, and they're still hanging out there, about 22.30. So not a heck of a lot of evolution on Macy's. NVIDIA, the chips, obviously this has been a hot sector during the pandemic and after it, and of course with all the trade wars and everything else going on, logistics, this has been a very contentious issue. Crypto, the chips have a hand in all of it out there. And NVIDIA, if you listen to our Option Block show listeners, you know NVIDIA is a frequent offender in what we call the chip zone. It's usually somewhere in the 4 to 6 range every day in the top 10 most actives. Up there with AMD, usually those two are hanging out somewhere in that spot. NVIDIA was popping off this week, 16th after the bell. They went into their announcement 159.10. They were pricing in 8%, and they delivered a whopping 2.1%, listeners. So they underperformed. Of course, if you waited a bit, they're actually down now. They're back down about almost exactly 7 handles to 152 and change right now. So if you waited a little bit, they actually got a little bit of that performance back. So again, that just goes to show you frame of reference is all in these names. But this has been an outperforming cycle, even if this week we didn't see a ton of outperformance. Net on the month, this has been a banger cycle. Let's look ahead a little bit as well. We also have reports for the names that are coming up soon, listeners. So if you're intrigued, and why wouldn't you be by all the big names popping off these days, we have it all broken down for you. Let's do a couple here. Let's see. Let's go out to next week. We got Dell. Dell popping off on the 21st. They were at 41.20 when we ran this report. They're pricing in $2.56. In the past, they've moved $2.49. So Dell, not expecting a heck of a lot of anything out there. At least not a heck of a lot of anything different. Let's see. Zoom. This has been obviously a pandemic darling, and then a bit of an also ran. The 21st after the bell for them, $83.50 were where they were running, or where they were trading, I should say, when we ran this report. They're pricing in $10.40. In the past, they've moved $10.48. So 2 for 2, Dell and Zoom, not expecting a heck of a lot of anything different out there next week. Interesting. After a banger season. Best Buy. This is the name. People have been ringing the death knell of this name forever. It tends to surprise people. Did well during the pandemic. Everyone going to get their telecommunications and stay-at-home tech gear. Best Buy 22nd before the bell. 69.12 is where they were trading when we ran these numbers. They're pricing in about $5.77. In the past, they moved $4.21. So around $1.50 worth of extra juice. So that's interesting. A little bit of extra juice lurking out there in Best Buy. A couple more here really quickly. Let's go to Hewlett Packard. We haven't talked about them. HP Inc. now because they're trying to get cool and hip. HP Inc. 22nd after the bell. They're trading 29.25. In the past, they've moved the $1.75. I'm sorry, they're pricing in $1.75 right now. In the past, they've moved the $1.35. So about 40 cents worth of extra juice out there in good old HP Inc. Intriguing. Is that merited? Well, looking at the season, the answer would probably be yes. This season has just been ridiculous. Week 1 was 105%. Then week 2, just explosive, 208%. We actually had a market with a very dark green. Usually outperformance is marked as light green. This is so ridiculous. It got heavily stamped with dark green because you've never seen anything like it. Week 3, 108%. Week 4, 124%. Week 5, back to 105%. And week 6 so far, 136%. So as you can see, all of them green, all of them outperforming, and the season as a whole coming in at a just mind-blowing 119%. Again, we had a great chat with Matt just this week on the Pro Q&A, breaking down these numbers and his thoughts for what they mean and what we can look at going forward from an earnings trading perspective. So if you want to hear that, head on over to the Pro. Just by way of comparison, the average for all the seasons since we've been running these numbers, it was 88%. It has just ticked up coming into this cycle at about a 92% right now. So that already is a little higher, and we're still blowing the doors off that at 119%. So however you cut this, this is a very historic cycle. If you're wondering for some earnings trades, we got a few new ones coming on where we closed out some calendars we had in Macy's, and we're adding, because you folks like some retail, we're adding some calendars, some calendars in Gap. So you can check out all the strikes and dates and everything else for those over there on the earnings trades report. Meanwhile, it's time for us to check out what you folks have on the brain, a little bit of the old volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Volatility Voicemail. This is indeed the portion of the show where you folks take the reins. We also sometimes like to shine a spotlight back on you folks with our questions of the week. We already paid off last week's on some of the early shows. I won't go through it again if you want to check out the results. But suffice it to say, 36% of you are still bargain hunting right now, but that is down from 56% of you back in March. So intriguing stuff. Our question of the week this week, a little bit different. We've seen the onset of these new, effectively daily expirations in a lot of the major indices out there. Listeners, you can now do a Tuesday expiration if you like, or maybe a Tuesday, Friday, or something along those lines, whatever floats your boat. And so we thought these are getting to be pretty popular. Have you guys added them to your trading arsenal? If so, why are you trading these things? And we gave you 4 choices. Well, 3 in the infamous other. We gave you hedging event risk. So let's say the Fed's coming up today or something like that, and you want to hedge something like that. Or you want to do a little bit of short-term speculation. Maybe you see the Fed's coming out. You're like, hey, I want to place a wager on the outcome. There you go. Or you want to do, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of the intra-week spreads. Maybe you're doing a little Monday, Tuesday action, whatever floats your boat out there. Or, again, the infamous other. Mr. Meatball, I ask you first off, I know you're becoming more of a fan of these daily expiration contracts. So what are you using them for? And then B, what do you think our audience is up to with them?
In fact, these daily expirations are almost exclusively what I trade now. I love them. It gives you so much flexibility. You don't have to worry about an overnight position. You never have to worry about an overnight position. And you can just kind of play what's in front of you and try and make some money that way. And that is what I've been doing and what I love about these dailies. I think that they're great. I'm a huge fan. You're
using them for short-term speculation, it sounds like. I think our audience is there as well.
100% I am. Yes.
You're not the first person to start whispering in my ear lately about the joys of single-day trading these days. Everyone's awesome, loving it.
But they are having an effect on volatility. I truly believe one of the reasons why VIX has been the other factor on VIX being anemic is the fact that I don't need to go out and buy longer dated options to hedge. I can literally just say, oh, the market's falling. I should buy some puts for today or tomorrow. There's no need for options that have over a month to expire. I'm a huge fan.
Saw some report recently, I think it was out of Bloomberg, saying something along the lines of just a ridiculous amount of SPKX paper in the third quarter. The one-day expirations was somewhere around 40% of total buy. I haven't had a chance to check that myself, but again, that's just ridiculous percent. If it's even close to that, that's still just a ridiculous amount of paper. So clearly, that's why we put this poll out. Clearly, folks are enamored with these products. Let's see. Why are you folks using them? Right now, listeners, with a few hours left, 47.1% of you are in the meatball camp of short-term speculation, 23.5% going my preferred route, intra-week spreads. I just like that notion. You want to do one day against another, you can do it now. It's kind of cool. Back in the day, listeners, when it was only once a month expiration, you couldn't do crazy things like 17.6% saying you're hedging the Fed, single day risk, and 11.8% saying other. And all of you are liars because you didn't give us what your other is. So I immediately discount your votes out there. Listen, let's go really quickly. Let's get some people's plural, if we can, onto the show. At least one. Let's go out to this one. Ailes with an S says, is there any point to buying VIX puts when the futures are not in contango? An interesting backwardation. And VIX puts, not exactly two great tastes that taste great together. Just go look at how VIX puts performed a few weeks ago. But Mr. Meatball, Ailes wants to know, is there any reason why someone would want to come and buy puts when the futures are backwards?
Yeah, you think vol's going to drop dramatically, That would be wild. Or maybe you're hedging a short position in SPX. There are actually a multitude of reasons why you might. Now, if you're trying to trade them outright to capture edge, maybe not the best trade, but it is certainly, there's certainly lots of reasons why someone might.
Yeah, if you're just straight buying them, hoping vol is going to come in, then you're betting that the backwardation is not going to be around for long, because if it hangs out during the lifespan of your options, probably not going to go the way you want. But again, crazier things have happened. You're probably betting at that point that backwardation is a bit of a short-term phenomenon. Let's see what we're betting on from vol next week, because it is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everyone, welcome to the crystal ball, the portion of the show where we attempt to wrestle with the slippery, the mercurial pig known as vol, and see what it holds in store for us in the coming weeks. Sometimes I crack myself up. Let's go out to VIX land. And I was feeling, this time last week, I was feeling something a little bit north of where I was going. I ended up taking it down about a point, and now I'm mad at myself because I was at a 22.5 this week, and if I had kind of kept it to where I was, everyone else was fading the hell out of this thing, and so maybe I let some of that infect me because I was thinking more along the lines of a 23.5, but alas, I went more 22.5, and now we're at about a 23 double to end the show in VIX land. The Rock Lobster was at a 21.65. Russell, because we were heading into a holiday next week, he thought we were going to break into the teens. 19.99 was where he went. He was feeling his best Prince impersonation out there. Spikes at about a 24.10 as we're ending the show. That's another thing that adds an interesting wrinkle to this right now, is this little bit of extra juice that's percolating, and Spikes kind of gives us a couple of moving targets out here. A long way around to saying I was the closest, but I was only about a point away, and that's not exactly a winner chicken dinner. And you look at Spikes, I wasn't that close there either. So no winners. I was at least closer than these other two yokels here on the show, so I could take some solace in that. I mean, that Dr. VIX guy, what does he know, right? And that Rock Lobster, just a crazy person wearing that tinfoil hat all the time. Let's look at our listeners really quick. Oh my God, Options Queen, what are you doing? Seriously, you need to manage a fund. What, 24? You're 0.07 away on Spikes, at least. You're about half a point away on VIX, but still, you're scaring me, Options Queen. Like, we just gave you a prize like last week. All right, reach out to our producers. We'll see what we can do. My goodness, you're scaring me. You're eerily prescient. The other closest looks like was Travelers 24.60. No joy there. AJD 23.70. That's not bad. You're about a quarter of a point away on VIX. So not terrible. Got some better guesses. Got some nearly 30 handles this week as well. So those were a little bit, shall we say, optimistic. A 28 option god. What are you doing? A 28. But yeah, there's a whole bunch here. Our producers will go through the list and make sure we didn't leave anybody out. A long way around to saying there are no winners this week, Mr. Meatball. So you were not on the show last week. So therefore, you did not have a chance to lose like myself and the Rock Lobster and the once and future Dr. VIX. So I will allow you to go first. What are you feeling for this time next week?
To guess 23.40. I don't understand what he was, or excuse me, 23.32. So I would have been a bullseye. Just saying.
You would look pretty good. You would look better than his 21.65.
Yeah. Like I said, I think next week is going to be a little slower. I'm liking vol to maybe come off a little bit. I'm going to say 22.22. 22 for the Meatball. And yes, we do have the holiday next week, so that has to be factored in. I'm at about a 22.5 right now. That would represent a nice point and change coming in. I don't hate where I am for this time next week because of the vol. It's probably going to come in, but I want to give the Meatball a little bit of breathing room because he came in at 22.22. So tell you what, I will be a nice character and I will say 21.76. So almost half a point below him. So there's your market for next week, listeners. 22.22 on the upside, 21.76 on the downside.
All right, listeners, that is going to do it for Volatility Views this week. For all of you on-demand folks, that will conclude your broadcast week with us. Thank you for joining us. We love you all. If you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing out there. And, of course, if you want to join the party, if you don't want your broadcast week to end with Vol Views, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to keep the Vol Party alive. And Mr. Meatball, if they want to check out the Vol Party over there in the land of the pit, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, go to optionspit.com and join us. We want to see you as a member of one of our readers of my VIX Edge blog and everything, and we're going to try and make you a better trader. So go to optionspit.com and check us out.
I'm looking in our chat. Options Queen's at a 1970 for next week, Mr. Meatball. So she's been knocking it out of the park lately. So maybe we both should be at a 19 handle now.
Yeah, maybe.
I hate to fade her. She's legit. All right. She has their finger on the lever, that VIX lever, moving things around. If you want to check out more about all things spikes, listeners, you know where to go. MyAxOptions.com/spikes is the place to go. We got to get on out of here again. Thanks to all of you who joined us on the on-demand side this week. We love you all. We'll see you back here on Monday for the option block and the crypto rundown. Then a bit of a truncated week next week, obviously with the holiday. Not going to be any Vol Views next Friday. I'm not a monster. Not going to make folks. So actually, I should have adjusted our crystal ball picking. I could see our producers chiming in that to me as I was doing the show. Alas, I missed it, listeners. So you know what? I tell you what I will do. I will reach out to Meatball. I will let him, if he wants to amend his pick, then I will let him change it. I will make mine. I will change mine because I kind of liked where I was. And I think Vol could make a bit of a recovery. So I will say this. In 2 weeks, Vol 23.55. How's that? And I will ask. That's our, so we'll have next week and then 2 weeks, 2 chances to win. I will reach out to the Meatball, allow him to do the same. To keep things fair as we keep on rolling, I have to get on out of here. Back in a little bit for Options Oddities for all you pro folks. And then back again in 2 weeks for Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MyAx is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about spikes at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.